Yes, so last night I woke up and it was actually a few hours after I went to sleep. Not long after I went to sleep. It was early in the night. It was about maybe 1:30 or something, and I had gone to sleep maybe around, I don't know, I didn't look at that clock, but maybe it was between 10 and 11 sometime. Anyways, I couldn't go back to sleep, and the reason why I kept waking up was because of they were racing again in the night. So the loud revving up of engines would every time it would wake me up, and that would then trigger again my anger and frustration, and I would retrieve in my anger, and there would be again the projections happening somehow, of seeing these cars having a car crash. And when it came to that, my higher self stepped in, and then I got the lesson. And it was the lesson for me to have control over my mind. That if my mind were to go into reaction mode, obviously that's when that is what would keep me in the loop and what would make my suffering of my nervous system stronger. And I need to learn how to absolutely 100% have control over my mind, because I'm stepping in. Otherwise, I cannot step into the my higher dimensional self, my higher dimensional Taurus field that becomes then that much more powerful. And then it can be dangerous, for me and for others, the effects that I have, because it's not just the positive effects that then become that much more amplified and directly manifest, but also if there is still negative in the system, right? So that's the reverse spin. They said, this is your simulation so that you can practice this. This has nothing to do with them or any of the story, It's just for you to see as a simulation and to take it as that. And what is it that makes me react and get angry is because something is suffering, and it is my nervous system. So take immediately, this is the point that you have to catch, where you have to stand right there and catch yourself, not going into the outside projection, but turn around and flood your, imagine and feel that you flood your nervous system with your presence and with white light, with your presence and with white light, with your presence and with white light. And when the mind goes back into projection, because then that is also the victim mind, that holds you hostage. You bring it back, turn around again, presence. So it was always to come back to presence with the whole nervous system, presence with the whole nervous system. That is what this is about. That is what it was, like a wake-up call, and it's very, very important. To prime my system to receive the Kryst consciousness currents, to be able to run the Kryst consciousness currents. For that, I have to be 100%, and then it's also clear control over the mind is not actually control. It is presence. So it is not okay, so if there was like a projection and an image of the car that revved up having an accident, to then finding an antidote image of it being okay, or going backwards, having, undoing the accident or something like that. That's still within the mind. So finding an antidote and undoing the thought is only a part of the same mechanism, which will hold the mechanism in place. So it is stepping out of into presence. So that means that when there is a thought, a train of thought that you're sitting on that train. So you're giving your energy to that. You are that thought. You are identified. You are in the victim mind. And to dissolve that and take your energy back from that current, which is the reversal current, inverted, it is not to undo or to change anything. It is not to want to manipulate these images. It is actually not to want to change anything. So you're experiencing something in the outside that is triggering a suffering within you. Usually it's the nervous system. And usually it's tied into some kind of story, and it's a victim identity. So you don't want to, when you notice you are in resistance to that and you want to change it, that is because you are suffering. So never, the call is to not go out in your mind and want it to be different and change it in that moment when you are triggered, but to step back and turn around and just be present with your body. Specifically your nervous system. You do that over and over, and you always bring your mind back into presence. You reel it back into presence. Yeah. And that was like, okay, and that's why this is happening. And so I kept doing that. And I even got up at one point because I really couldn't sleep anymore. And it was like, is this, this is no coincidence that you can't sleep, because you're meant to wake up. And this is how you can practice. This is your practice. We cannot graduate you until you have this, until there is no potential when you are in the higher currents, in the bigger torus field, when you are, like embodying that, of any such negative, inverted reaction. So that's a thought that you put your emotion to, and that's where you put your light, and that is then at this high manifesting power level. So that's not possible. And actually, I can't even step through the portal, so to speak. I can't step through that gate into the higher frequencies until I have until this becomes a natural given second nature, so that I cannot, should I be triggered, that it is the natural reaction in a sense, but it's not a reaction. To just go, instead of go in reaction, you go present. You get present. That is the ingrained reaction of the nervous system, actually. So the nervous system doesn't react anymore, and doesn't grab your mind and the identity. It has not that conditioning anymore. It is now conditioned to whenever it's triggered, to go present. Yeah. And that's a practice. That's a practice of consciousness. And so I had to stretch my body, so I got up and did some stretches. And then I went back to sleep. And I noticed already then, I had already noticed before I got up, how everything had quieted down significantly. And definitely by the time, but already before I got up to do the stretches, it was already completely quiet. No more races, no more cars. Completely so quiet that I took out my earplugs. And then when I laid back down, it was completely quiet, beautiful, and I could sleep without earplugs. And it was showing me again, see how this is your hologram, this is your simulation. It was terribly loud, very close by to your place, that it pulled you every time out of your sleep, and that's very rare. Well, that it's that loud is kind of rare. And then so what they show me is that it is a mirroring of what's inside of you. This kind of your nervous system. And okay, this is what's coming now. Okay, so your nervous system has had to decompress, and it has taken on a lot from other people when you were socializing with people that have a much denser frequency and a much more reverse, more inverted spin. And when you take that on, hold on, do I really take it on, or what is it? Okay, and we will explain this. Because you said you never take anything on. It's just an amplification of what is there. Exactly. That is exactly what it is. It is an amplification of what is still there. Because if there was nothing of that sort, of that matching frequency within you, it would their denser frequency would simply either not be able to interface with you, or it just wouldn't happen in that sense, and it would pearl off like water off a duck's back. It wouldn't affect you. It wouldn't trigger you, because there would be nothing to trigger. And that means also a huge heart, full of love, full of only love and compassion. And that's then your field is so strong. But then what could happen is that when you're at that stage, that they would not want to be, they would go, it would be very uncomfortable for them, because their density would come up. And you can already tell that sometimes, that it is unpleasant for them. And what has been the case for you is that you've been conditioned to dampen down. You have conditioned yourself to then limit yourself, and to just go, take back on that identity, that denser identity that is their projection onto you, and become that to make it more comfortable, So basically you would go to sleep, and you do in their presence. You go to sleep, you go back to sleep. And that is why, okay, so here now comes the explanation. It's not that you took on from them. It is that they make you go to sleep, because this is not happening consciously yet, and that has been an adjustment and previously a survival mechanism. And of course, it's also part of your journey and your own awakening journey and your own mission, right? Because in order to liberate others, you have to be able to liberate yourself, and you have to be able to interface with them. you know, so you have to run the matching currents also in your own system so that you can interface. Yes, and also then on another level, in the family, it's on the DNA, you know, it's in the DNA that you can interface. But that DNA has to be activated. Okay. So, let's see, where were we? Getting a little bit warm. Yeah, so you fell into a habituated programming and became denser and, you know, went to sleep in your consciousness. That also means, however, that you've noticed this, that instead of going into opening the heart and taking, you know, holding space for them in love, you would go into judgment. And you would go into resistance because it feels so bad for you, because when you fall asleep and you dense down, you don't have the capacity to transcend. In that then you get triggered, you know, and the nervous system receives also on top of it. When you're sitting with them, it is also feeling theirs. So even though you don't take it on, it's in that moment, that's why you felt so terrible afterwards. It is in that time of interfacing physically, you're running a lot of dense currents through your system, and your system doesn't have the space to transcend it. Now, here is the next aspect of why it feels so bad, is that your natural frequency is much higher. So and you run a lot more energy. So more higher frequency is running through your currents. You have a bigger, faster toroidal field, aura. And so to become a match to theirs, to densen down, take the capacity away to transcend the density, then the density amplifies through the physical interfacing. This then creates a huge schism within you, from, you know, a huge discrepancy. That is a huge discrepancy, and this is like, and we gave you two images. This is like, you know, your normal speed is much faster on the highway than theirs. So you slam the brakes, but a part of you is still going really fast, yeah? So not only are you slamming the brakes, and that takes away a lot of energy, but also then the slamming of the brakes becomes amplified through the other brakes, you know, the other density. So that's on top of it now, going through your system. So you're slamming on the brakes really hard, and your other self is going really fast. And what happens then? There is a huge, you know, gap within you, a huge division within you that you need to catch up first. And the catching up happens through presence. And that's why it was so important, you know, so you hadn't caught up yet, and it was all still jammed in your nervous system, you know, this, so your nervous system was like filled up with dense energy that it couldn't discharge, and the discharge is really it's a transcendence of it. It's making space for it, to decompress, and that is the discharge. It decompresses and thereby comes back into its, from the reversal. But it could also, it's not necessarily all of it is it all reversal? Yes, because you are in the victim consciousness. When you are in judgment, you are in victim consciousness because you are suffering from the, energetically triggered by, or in the vicinity or in the presence, which is not really, it's not presence, you see, in the physical vicinity of their toroidal field. It is painful for you energetically because you're identified in victim consciousness as well. So you're just playing between the egoic identities. You're not in presence with each other. And that means that the hearts are closed, even though there was love, of course, and that's the saving grace, and there is love, and you can always come back to love. But it's all those places where you are suffering and where you are not in love, where you are in resistance. And when it's painful enough, and depending on who it is, there will be then judgment going out, and it can be very subtle, but still this judgment is another slamming on the brakes. It's another closing of the heart, when the opening of the heart is actually the saving grace and the healing of the nervous system. And that would make you able to sit there without having to suffer. But that wasn't possible at that time because you're still learning, you're still getting all of this. Okay, so to wake you up in the middle of the night, to trigger your nervous system, and really it is, as you know, when we go into the higher frequencies, it's not anymore cause and effect because it is the knowing of the oneness of everything. So it is at the same time as looking at it from the identity or from the 3D perspective where it is cause and effect, but it's also you can say that your nervous system caused that experience, if you want to, because if you want to say it, if you want to look at it from cause and effect, you have to look at it from both sides, just like you can look at both sides. You can see the past and the future. It's not just running in one direction. It's flowing in both directions, from the future into the past, from the past into the future. Okay, so just like that, if you're in the cause and effect, it's also what seems logical is that the revving up of the engines, the noise, was causing you to wake up, yes? And at the same time, now looking at it from a higher perspective, but also translated into the cause and effect perspective, it is a simulation, and just like in a dream, everything on the outside is a reflection of what is on the inside. So something was also in that agitation state, because you can feel someone who has the need to drive at night, races in the city and rev up the engine. You can drive a race, you can drive really, really fast. You don't have to rev up the engine like that. That kind of revving up of the engine is also emotionally, there's agitation behind it, there's anger behind it, yeah. There is nervous system anxiety behind it, yeah, and it is also the representation for you on the outside of that feeling. And just like that is in every dream, where every dream is completely morphing and lending itself in a mirror of exactly that emotional and also thought, mind landscape, it is the same as in the waking life. So that is very important to realize. And after you met your nervous system with presence, which is what it needs, what it is calling out for, that is its healing, yeah? And presence is light, and presence is space, and presence is love. So after you did that every single time, and we were there to guide you, we were there to support you, your mind, your awareness. Mm-hmm. Then you noticed how everything quieted down. Just as your nervous system quieted down, the outside quieted down. Yes. And this morning, you realized that you had slept all night after you went to sleep again without earplugs. And when you went to sleep, it was absolutely quiet. So, not only that, but through this awakening hours, awakening time last night, it was also clear that if you go and hold yourself in victim consciousness, in that field, and you go into reaction, you keep and hold yourself in suffering. And there is no way out. That's when you're in prison. And it is entirely in your hands to step out of prison. And not only that, it is also every time that you do that, you heal that. You decompress, you heal, you bring that charge back home. Yeah. And indeed, it is not a charge you took on from others. It is your own charge. I mean, you can say you took it on through walking through life. But what we mean is this was not charge from others you took on into your system when you were interfacing physically with them. This is your own charge that was there latent, and that was that was amplified when you were there, and that you had not released or decompressed and healed and received yet. You needed to make more space. And of course, we are also here to help you make so much space in your nervous system in order to receive the codes and the flow currents of the Christ consciousness current, that you can run those, that you can run them safely, and then embody that aspect of your consciousness that is at that frequency of Christ consciousness. And that, of course, brings with it a huge opening of the heart. Also, yes.